So first of all, it's an extreme weather event. It's weather, not climate change.
We had barely 45 minutes to try to get something out of the basement, and the basement door burst open, and we had to run upstairs.
But this is not necessarily flooding for what happened here. This is an issue that's got to do with the river not being dredged as normal. For the last 5 years, they haven't dredged this river.
Flooding and mudslides has brought much of British Columbia to its knees since November 16th. The wreckage left many scrambling for safety and looking for necessities like food and medication, and it also prompted Good Samaritans to come out and to help. But unfortunately, it's also created an avenue for climate zealots to turn this tragedy into political fodder. Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News. I'm standing in front of the Tradex Convention Center, which has been turned into an evacuee center for some of the people needing help right now. This is located in Abbotsford, one of the areas that was hit quite hard from the flooding. Other areas like Merritt, as well as Vancouver Island, also were hit hard as well. Many have come out in the Abbotsford area here. There was firefighters and other volunteers that set up sandbags to help stop the flooding. Things are calming down, although there are still some warnings. BC has called a state of emergency, although some, like MLA Ellis Ross, say it's too little, too late.
When you call a state of emergency, this is the thing. People think that automatically things happen. No, it doesn't. That's not how it works. The state of emergency actually allows the provincial government to commandeer a bunch of equipment and resources all around the province, and they've got the network already to do it. But once you push that button to call a state of emergency, these resources in the private sector, they need time to mobilize. At least 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours to mobilize. They've got to secure fuel sources, for example. If it's a float plane system, they got to go out and scout the areas where they can land to make sure there's no hazards underneath the water, for example. They've got to understand where all their spare equipment is. It's not easy. It doesn't instantly happen. So calling a state of emergency now? Well, number one, you're going to have to mobilize a lot of equipment. It'll take some time. But really, this should have been done a long time ago. 2 days ago. At the very least, when you had a warning of a torrential downpour of rain, you should have had that button ready to go, just in case. Right now, it seems like the government's scrambling. To do what?
We were able to speak to a few of the people who stayed here, and they said it's got a nice little setup here. We're seeing some of the vehicles are loaded with belongings, as I imagine they had to flee. But here's what a few of them had to say.
House, it's pretty bad. We're right at the corner of Wacom Road on the farm side, and that's the one that's always on the news all the time. We're surrounded by water, waves of water. There's 7 feet of toxic water in the basement. And everything, we had barely 45 minutes to try to get something out of the basement, and the basement door burst open, and we had to run upstairs.
Oh my God.
So we didn't get much of anything out of that's where my brother and I lived, downstairs.
So then what did you guys do? You went upstairs, and how did you get out of there?
Well, the next day it was getting pretty scary, and I was scared for my mom's health and that, right? Because the furnace is underwater now. We got no heat, and it started to get cold. Then they shut the water off, right? And so I flagged down some boats. The search and rescue tried to get, but where our house is, there's like a 12-foot drop, and there's rapids on both sides. So they was sucking the boats in on, so they just couldn't get us. We had to wait for a hovercraft.
And did you have a farm as well? Any animals? Or?
We live on 10 acres, and a farmer rents that, Mr. Schroeder, and then the Myers down the other road rent our other farmland. We used to have dairy cattle many years ago, but not anymore.
Oh my gosh, well, I'm so sorry. How are people coming together to help you?
Well, we're here trying to get registered and everything so we can get some support services. I'm hoping to get back to the house once the water drops and maybe grab some important papers and things, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see what after that, and try to get some help to get everything because all the freezers and everything's still full of food. I want to get the power and the gas off. I never even got a chance to do that because the breaker panel's downstairs and that. But just so hopefully the house doesn't burn down, short out or whatever, right? Yeah, so we're just taking it day by day. Like everybody else, I know I feel sorry for my neighbors out in Sumas Prairie. But I mean, we're farmers, we persevere, we help each other as best we can. Absolutely. So it's, the whole community's coming together. It's a nice thing to see.
My husband and I came home from Mexico yesterday and obviously couldn't get home, so we stayed in the evacuation center for one night, and now we're hoping to get home through number 7. My son-in-law was able to get through, and we'll see.
So where is home for you?
Chilliwack.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And have you heard anything about what the state of your house is, or?
I think we're fine where we are. It's just getting there that's not fine, but.
And how is it inside of the center?
Great, yeah. It's very well organized, and they have everything that you could need.
There's a team of 3 dogs inside right now, just going and helping to de-stress, give them all the love, and in return they get an awful lot of attention and petting and rubs, and they're very, very, that relaxes our dogs too.
That's amazing. And did you notice anything else that's happening inside of the center?
There is some music going on. There's some people that have taken up the guitar and the ukulele, and it's actually really wonderful in there. People are not necessarily, I wouldn't say happy, but relaxed, it seems. And it's a good place for people to hang out, I think.
They're safe and dry. Well, thank you guys at St. John's Ambulance, and you too, lady, for your service. It's great to hear that things are going good inside here, but make no mistake, this is still a very big tragedy. At least 4 lives were lost in the Lillooet area, and 1 person is still yet to be found. Many farmers have had to leave their livestock behind. Some stayed behind despite the evacuation order to save which ones they can. People are concerned about their house, and shelves are empty in the grocery store. But some people are turning this tragedy into their own benefits of a political agenda. It's no surprise that mainstream media news outlets are tying climate change to the disaster, often offering no alternative explanation. The Hill Times reported that Emergency Preparedness Minister Bill Blair provided an update on the federal government's response to the BC flooding crisis in a press conference on November 18th. And that climate change and infrastructure advocacy will likely ramp up in response to the crisis, according to some lobbyists. As you'll see in this report, hearing from Michelle Sterling from Friends of Science, the events that took place here have happened before in similar ways. We'll get to that in just a moment, but I want to give you another example of the types of people bending this tragedy into their own favor. Take a look at this tweet. It's from a Mike Gibbs, former media relations staffer for Public Health Ontario. It is quite something to watch places that voted heavily for a climate change denying party that favors fossil fuels be decimated overnight by a climate change disaster. In September, 47% of electors in Abbotsford voted Conservative. In 2019, when CPC had no plan at all, 51%. Way to blame the victims there, Mike. So what is this? Every time there's a natural disaster, are we going to see it being blamed on climate change so that you pay more taxes? Alice Ross raised another good point, walking through what should be a river on Vancouver Island. Take a look at this.
I'm right now outside Halalt First Nation looking at the Chemainus River. Take a look at this. But this is not necessarily flooding for what happened here. This is an issue that's got to do with the river not being dredged as normal. For the last 5 years, they haven't dredged this river. So the last 5 years, they've seen the river back up a couple of times over the years, but not this bad.
Again, I have an interview to show you with Michelle Sterling. She's going to explain how, in particular, this area, Abbotsford, has seen quite bad floods before, like this in the 1990s. You can see over the Watcom Road area that the flooding that happened back in the 90s there is almost parallel to what we're seeing right now. If you appreciate that at Rebel News we bring you the other side of the story, then you might want to support our journalism. We don't get a penny from mainstream media, so if you go to realreporters.ca and donate, everything there goes so that we can bring stories like this to you. Here's Michelle.
All right, so joining us now is Michelle Sterling. I thought who better to ask than our favorite friend of science.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being back on Rebel News. Now, what is your take about this horrible thing that we're seeing that's happening across BC, but we're also seeing many taking it as an opportunity to say, there's climate change for you. So what's your take on that?
Well, I think it's a tremendous human tragedy, and it's really a huge blow to Canada, to our economy, to our spirit. And really, my heart goes out to everyone in BC who's, trying to get through this. But it's an even worse tragedy when people are pinning climate change on it, because that will divert important public funds from taking care of the infrastructure rebuild and the improvement of things to protect people in the future. Because, putting up a wind farm or a solar panel wouldn't have done a thing to stop this atmospheric river. So first of all, it's an extreme weather event. It's weather, not climate change. Climate change is measured over periods of 30, 50, 100, or 1,000 years. It's not measured by singular events. And secondly, this atmospheric river called the Pineapple Express frequently hits that part of the coast. So it's not unknown. And there have been previous incidents like this. I think it was 1943, 1945, something like that, 1990. So it's not something new. It just happens to be at a time of year when the mountains are covered in snow. The ground is already freezing up, and the rain has fallen on this snow, causing snow melt and also not being able to penetrate the soil where normally a lot of rain might be absorbed. So now it's the weight of the water, which was like in 72 hours, they got 150 millimeters of water. So just to understand that, if you take a 1 square meter pan and you fill it with 1 millimeter of water, that weighs 1 kilogram. But there were 72 hours with 150 millimeters of water, just stripping whole sides off the mountain. Just that burden of weight, as well as gravity and all the other debris that it picks up going down the mountain. This, as we've seen, has shorn whole roads and bridges apart. Now, the other thing that people have to realize is the area around Abbotsford actually used to be a lake.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that till you told me off camera.
Yeah, so it was called Sumas Lake, and about 100 years ago it was drained, and then a drainage canal system was put in, the pumping station was put in, and there was also a debris trap further upstream from the pumping station, which is intended to keep, wood and other kind of plant foliage and such like from getting into the station and causing it to malfunction. Well, that apparently has not been kept up properly. And also the pumping station was really at risk. It may still be, I'm not sure, but a whole army of civilians came out the other night and built a sandbag dike. But, this is an area that's actually below sea level and below the water level that surrounds it. So when that water level goes up, of course, those berms will be breached and we'll have flooding like we have now. And it happened in 1990. And people should also know that the biggest flood of the Fraser River was in 1894. So, this is a common problem in that part of the world.
If you're in any of the areas that have been affected by the wreckage and you still need help, thankfully there are lots of people doing things out there. I will link some of those resources for you in the written report at rebelnews.com, but you can see that some local pilots have gone together. They are flying to Hope to bring people back to and from Chilliwack. Some farmers are getting together, preparing food. Even the Freedom Rally World protesters are getting a 7-ton truck together to help relieve some as well. So thank you for everybody who's gotten together to help these people in need. I'm Drea Humphrey, and this is Rebel News. If you appreciate our boots on the ground reporting and that we bring you the other side of the story, again, feel free to help support us so we can continue to do so by donating at realreporters.ca.